Delta.
Yep. Hi, everyone. If anybody has joined already, we will wait a few minutes until people start joining the workshop, and we'll get started. I see already a couple of familiar names on the chat, so that's cool. Say hi to everyone in the chat, people. Welcome. We will be starting soon. During the workshop, we will be using Slido. You see now the banner on the screen. So if you have kind of questions or comments or whatever throughout the workshop, you can jump into Slido, put that code number that you see there. It's free. You don't need to anything. You need to sign up. You can even like ask anonymous questions, and then at the end of the workshop, we will go over some of the most voted questions in there, and yep, we will be discussing those, right? So we'll leave that for the end. Hi Ivan, hi Nicolas, hi Phil, hi Títeres de Cartón. Yep, so let's give it 1 or 2 more minutes, and we will get started. For anybody that has already joined, you can share the Twitter link, you can share the YouTube link. Everything is open for the community. So if you have friends, family, or whoever you want to share this workshop with, we are going live. So please spread the word, please share, and we are about to start. Share it on Discord, on Twitter, on wherever you want. It's everything open for the community. So we'll super appreciate that you share with your colleagues. So, yep, 3 minutes already, so I can get started, I guess. Again, thank you all for being here once again with us. We are on the final session of the Secure Development Series that we have been running for the last couple of months. It's been incredible. I think that we have been able to share lots of content, and the feedback from the entire community has been awesome, really. So thank you all for the comments and the love that you have shared. Today is session number 6. We have done already 5 sessions. If this is the first time that you join, I would recommend you. I have some links that I will be sharing afterwards, but I would recommend you to find the rest of the sessions that we did on YouTube in the Open Zeppelin channel, youtube.com/OpenZeppelin. You have all the previous sessions in there. All the recordings are available for free, open for the entire community. We also have in our blog, also I will be sharing that, written articles, each one related to the sessions that we have been doing. So if you're more of a reader than a watcher, then you can go to the articles and see that. But today I want to take a step back, right? So we have been throughout this entire series in which we have covered multiple topics, right? I want to say a couple of things today about how we can do security, but just beyond Solidity code, right? Not only about smart contract code, but actually about some other practices that I've been speaking actually with I would say top developers in the space about these kind of topics, and I think that I have some interesting insights to share. So the entire series, of course, we are running this from Open Zeppelin, and we are being able to share lots of insights that we have at the company from the audits team and from the contracts team and the product team. So if you're not familiar with Open Zeppelin, you're not entirely sure what we are up to these days. You're probably know us for providing security solutions for the top projects out there in the Ethereum and other chains space. We do audits. We're pretty well known for our audits business and the quality of the audits that we do. We have a product, we will be discussing Defender later, which will help you manage contracts in a secure way. Super interesting stuff. I will be sharing more details about it later. And there is something really nice upcoming in these following days. And of course, the contracts library, right? So probably everybody has been building smart contracts these days, has been using Open Zeppelin contracts. So I shouldn't say much about it. I mean, it's already pretty well known out there in the community and super popular. So this is mainly today our main focus, right? And these are some of the names among many projects that we have been working with. The series has been about secure development, right? So we have been sharing insights, knowledge, thoughts, considerations, risk, everything that I have to share about what does it mean to smart contract security, at least for me and from us at Open Zeppelin. We have covered sessions on the dangers of token integration and how tokens can behave very weirdly and can break your project, how to implement secure access controls in your contracts, how to integrate with price oracles, and what are the risks and security considerations of that. We have been talking about the strategies for secure governance. We have been discussing different kind of risks and consideration when it comes to upgrades of smart contracts, right? So lots of different topics, but very important, right? And as always, and I will of course share the same meme again, the idea is always sharing the mindset, right? Not only stay with the specific topics, but try to convey what the mindset is, what does it mean from a more conceptual level to think of security when we use smart contracts, right? And today's this session called Onward with Smart Contract Security, and we'll see what that's about. But one question that people usually may ask me and other like security-minded people is, okay, what are the most concerning issues that you are seeing in smart contracts? And usually it ends up being like I copy-paste my answer, right? But it's, at least for me, quite true that the most concerning issues are the ones that we have been actually discussing, right? So today, integration with tokens is quite a sensitive topic. And we have been seeing issues around in the last couple of weeks. Access controls, again, another topic that usually comes up in security incidents, vulnerabilities, exploits, problems with access controls. Integrations with price oracles, again, we have seen that examples in the last couple of weeks about this. Governance mechanisms, I would say that we haven't still seen, I mean, we have seen a couple of instances, but probably this is still to come, like bigger problems. Hopefully not, but reality usually is different to what we believe. Security problems in governance mechanisms, right? So when DAOs fully evolve and mutate and grow, I would say that we will see more and more interesting issues about that. And we have covered strategies to implement safer governance mechanisms, right? And upgradability. We know that upgradability is such a complex piece that we need to handle it carefully. And at the end of the day, there are multiple issues that we are seeing already when it comes to upgradability. So, well, these are some of the most concerning issues that I'm seeing today in smart contract security. And at the end of the day, these are the ones that we covered throughout the entire series, right? With specific examples, with code snippets, seeing how top projects are doing these kind of things. So it's been quite interesting, I would say. And in our previous session, I kind of tried to summarize that whole thing of knowledge into a single function. And this is the function that we saw, right? So we saw the solidity function, which if you look at it closely, like, okay, it has an integration with tokens and it's integrating with price oracles and it has access controls, and perhaps behind their only owner, there is a governance mechanism and it's implementing upgradability. So in a single function, in 10 solidity lines, we end up seeing that there's like whole lot different kind of topics involved in the same function. And we as security-minded people should be paying attention to that, right? So that's when like line by line reviews come into place, right? So we need to be super careful, super detailed, and think about everything that we have seen in the previous workshops when we are analyzing each of these lines of Solidity code. It's not that easy, but well, it's what we have. And I would say that given that the increasing complexity of smart contracts, this is only getting more and more complex, right? This is only getting more difficult. So quite challenging. But I was telling you at the beginning that today is not about like this, like looking at Solidity code, right? Today is more about, because we have already done that. Today is about saying, okay, we have this piece of code. And what is beyond this? What is beyond simple practices and not so simple practices of a smart contract security? How can we make our system more secure just beyond Solidity code, right? So what else matters when we are looking at this piece of code? And some questions that may come up are usually like, okay, is there available documentation? Is this even tested? How are others actually implementing similar features? How is this even going to be launched? What are the deployment scripts for this? Is that even tested? How is this going to be operated? Is this being peer reviewed? Is this being audited? Are there bug bounties for this? And I could go on, right? Monitoring systems, key management, secure operations, and so on and so on and so on and so on. And again, as applications based on smart contracts grow, I would expect that the list of questions and considerations and risks would usually grow as well. So the idea for this talk is trying to give some ideas and thoughts around these questions, right? Which is this, like, what else contributes to security? Let's take a step back and let's try to think of a couple of things, okay? Ideally, non-developers will also benefit from this talk, given that we are not going to be seeing like very specific details of Solidity code, where we are going to be seeing like more high-level practice, but that definitely contribute to security. So that even you can start thinking of how do I improve my coding practices throughout the entire process, right? And I don't leave security till the end. And I've been, again, I will say it again, but I've been speaking with I would say, very, very great developers out there of Solidity and trying to poke them about what kind of practices they implement and what kind of things they do. And today I'm sharing some of that, some of the things that they have shared with me, which has been like a super insightful experience for me because I'm not a developer, right? One thing that I've been told, and I would agree with, is that we should be starting small and focused, right? So we will start in here and we will be developing different kind of topics throughout the talk. I should say there's a lot going on, and probably if you're new to Ethereum and blockchain landscape, you might be impressed. But if you're not that new, well, you might be getting used to it already. And there's lots going on, right? So it's super easy to lose focus, and it's super easy to want to implement 100 different features and not being able to do one single feature right? So one thing that many projects are doing is, as they mature, as they realize that they are building multi-billion-dollar systems, they start thinking not first in coding, but actually first in defining the interactions and the interfaces of contracts, and then coding them, right? So basically the question is, what are the main interactions that other contracts or users will apply on this contract, will use? How are people going to consume and operate on this contract? Okay, so they will define the interfaces and the documentation for that, and they will think of those interactions. And once they have all of that clear in mind, then it's just a matter of, okay, let's implement that, right? And in that process comes in weeks, and honestly, I've been told that weeks of meeting and designing, right? Not coding, like designing documents, specifications, and involving non-developers in the process, right? So you might have people in your team, I know product owners, for instance, that perhaps they are not strictly 8 hours a day coding, but they have a sense of how a system should look like, how a system should be architectured. So they can help with that. And involving them from day one in design documents, specifications, things that can be understood by non-coders, that it's super important, and many projects in the space are really going for this, right? And finally, of course, reusing what's at hand. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, and I will be repeating myself over this talk about this concept, but remember, there are already known implementations about many patterns. So you can, at least at the beginning, just to start small, focus, use what's at hand, and then, if necessary, in the future, in future iterations, you can make those things more customized and more efficient and so on, right? But for the first MVPs, for the first iterations, probably you want to be fully focusing on really what matters for your project and not implementing many multiple things that perhaps are not that necessary. When it comes to documentation, this is the feeling that we get when we jump into a code base and we don't see documentation, right? If you have ever been doing code reviews, probably you're familiar with this feeling. And I cannot stress enough. I mean, you might say that it's trivial, but I wouldn't say so. Like, from our experience, it's really important to have clear documentation. Documentation, I see it as a way of highlighting the intention of the code, right? Which is usually kind of different from the implementation, right? So what the code does usually doesn't match too much what the code intends to do, which are two very different things, right? And we as code reviewers should be able to tell those differences. So documentation, in my opinion, should help highlight the intention of the code, right? So there are a couple of ways, very obvious, but again, I should stress them because I don't see them implemented too much usually. Inline comments and rich documentation, such as documenting contracts, functions, variables, and everything that you can document. There is this cool NatSpec format, natural specification format, that the Solidity team recommends, that I would advise you to use, just because I will mention afterwards some tools that can help you actually build external documentation out of this NatSpec documentation that you can use. So I would say you can go for that format if you want. When I talk about documentation, I would say like serious documentation and comprehensive documentation, right? So this is the kind of documentation that I would love to see in all projects, right? This is Balancer. This is one interface contract, the iVault from Balancer. This is live, this is open source, you can check it out. This is just an interface, right? You are seeing documentation for a couple of functions, which is incredible, super thorough, expliciting what are the failure modes, what is the intention of the interface, what events does it emit, the parameters, everything. Like, you can read this entire interface and you will get lots of information about how a vault in Balancer will work just by reading the documentation on an interface, right? So it's super thorough, and I would love, I mean, already you see it and you see it's one line of Solidity, 50 lines of documentation. And this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about, not just saying what a parameter does, right? Probably we can tell that from the code. There's lots of hidden complexity that you can highlight with documentation. And again, I could continue showing things about this interface in Balancer because it's awesome. There's a tool called Solidity.chem. It's open source. You can use it. That will help you build external documentation from the documentation in your contracts. If you are familiar, if you want to use it, give it a try. It's open source. It's free. And we use it at Open Sapling contracts for our documentation, so it's great. When it comes to external documentation, I would say, like, you can get creative, right? Architecture, economic incentives, role design decisions, and so on and so forth. We have seen lots of examples about that throughout the entire series. So probably it's a good place to put all of these kind of design considerations that you have thought of in your project, right? Yes, Ivan, I can share the source later, or otherwise you can go to the Balancer repo and you will find it. Is like the iVault interface is one of the most well-known interfaces. And README files, right? So README files, simple but necessary. We get projects that don't have README files. When it comes to testing, I mean, we have covered starting smaller focus, documentation. Let's go now to testing, because I have been talking again with developers about how they test and what kind of practices they use. So I won't be covering the basics, right? I will just tell you some data points that I gathered, which might be useful for you. A couple of ones. I will dive deep only in some of them, right? Not in everyone, but First of all, one that is super interesting is that speed matters, right? Not just because we want more efficient things, but because developers shouldn't be fearing adding more tests, right? If you have like a super slow and super difficult to read and super difficult to maintain test suite, it might be the case that you don't even want to add another test. And not adding another test, you might be missing a bug and you might be missing like a huge security vulnerability. So speed matters. Pay attention to that and try to make your test suite more efficient. Testing for edge cases, again, might seem obvious, but we don't see it too often as we would like to. Test for the happy cases, but also test for the not so happy cases, right? So what happens if functions get called multiple times, if functions get called in multiple ways in an unexpected order, or with parameters that you wouldn't expect, or with very high values, or with very low values? I mean, try to test for edge cases and see where you can actually hack your system yourself with your tests. Because if you don't do it, probably others will. Testing against local forks, what I would advise in that sense, and what I've been told, is that it's necessary, but sometimes can be rather cumbersome, right? So I would advise perhaps just having a small set of smoke tests that you can run against a local fork, and of course test your deployments as well against a local fork of mainnet, but perhaps not the entire test suite, because it might end up being too slow from what I've been told. I mean, for high coverage as well, investing in helpers as well. Those are like good practices that I've been hearing and I've been seeing applied, which usually work. If you want to get smarter, probably exploring different tools to do fuzzing, property testing, symbolic execution. I think that more and more those tools are like finding its place in the development process. So exploring that kind of tools could become useful as well. And following others, right? If you are implementing a lending protocol, probably it might make sense to go to another lending protocol and see how they test stuff. If you're implementing a stablecoin, probably it might make sense to go to the code base of another stablecoin and see how they test stuff. And so on and so forth, right? So seeing others, seeing how they apply practices, seeing and talking to them, getting involved in their communities will really help you level up your testing and hopefully make your contracts a little bit more secure. There's a testing guide in here. You go to the repository of Moloch DAO, and there's a testing guide. There are not many testing guides out there. If you want to read more about the testing guide, that's a good one, and I would recommend it. Talking about learning from others, so we can learn in two ways, right? We can learn either from success or from failures, I would say. From success, I mean jump into other people's code bases. And I've been telling that already, but I want to stress it. You should be able to know how some project does something that perhaps is interesting for you. And please, like, don't read like top to bottom, like a book, right? You want to read in a non-linear way, in a smart way, trying to understand the components, the architecture, the interactions. You will learn a lot. Remember that the entire ecosystem is still fairly new, and there's not lots of documentation and learning resources and books and that kind of things. So the best place to learn where the insights are just in the code bases of people, right? Of the top projects out there, go to their code bases and learn. Honestly, that's how very smart people in the ecosystem are learning. That's the way they are learning. There's no magic recipe in here. And once you learn, share those insights, right? Share with the community and try to help others, and let's try to together build a more secure and robust and safer ecosystem, right? And please don't blindly copy-paste. There are licenses that we should be respecting. We can also learn from mistakes, right? And I'm not sure that lots of developers out there are very familiar with this, but there are lots of security resources that you can refer to. I mean, you won't become a security auditor, you won't become a black hat hunter, you won't become a white hat hacker, but you should be able to understand the basic and not so basic vulnerabilities and even try to think how attackers are kind of executing these attacks, right? So you should be able to learn from mistakes. And what some people are doing is, first of all, like reading security newsletters, but most importantly, analyzing public security issues. And I will stop here. I want to say that there are projects out there already that every time that a security vulnerability in any project out there appears, they just get together and they analyze whether that vulnerability could be applied into their system, right? They are actually doing this like today. So it can be like a cool practice for you, right? Trying to understand each vulnerability that comes up out there and seeing where that applies or not. And if it doesn't apply, just right, like why doesn't it apply? What does it apply? What are you doing in the future to protect your system against that kind of vulnerabilities? And you will start learning and kind of building a knowledge base of vulnerabilities and how those apply or don't apply to your system. So learning in that way, it's great. And again, there are projects and people out there doing this already. Reading public security reports and playing war games and CTFs, of course, are valuable practices as well. Okay, so you have been building, you have been documenting, you have been testing, and so on. And now it comes the time of integrating, right? More and more. And we have discussed a couple of things around composability throughout the series, and it's an interesting topic. So integrations, we already know that can be risky in some sense. And there are multiple ways to think about this, right? One is like when you call others, right? So let's start in there. You call others, right? Remember, what you are calling is usually completely out of your control. Meaning that if that contract doesn't belong to your system, you should be careful with that. Just because you should be having like a kind of a healthy distrust for any standards. Remember, we saw that in the dangers of token integration, that tokens, for instance, are kind of complex beasts. Don't blindly trust their interfaces, verify their behavior, make sure that everything works as you expect it to work. Don't assume immutability. Remember, lots of upgradable contracts out there that can break interfaces, so make sure to be able to at least be aware of that and make a conscious decision about it. Think of ways in which these different kind of integrations that you're doing might introduce threats into your system. It might not be that easy. It might require time. It might require thought and discussions and learnings, but it's something that it's super valuable, right? So understanding where if I'm integrating with this token or with this price oracle or with this protocol that is DeFi, blah, blah, how that misbehaving could affect my system. And of course, I'd be aware of calls and delegate calls to user supply addresses. That's usually the main attack vector that we are seeing when it comes to unsafe external calls, right? So please be careful with that kind of integrations. The other point that I was mentioning is, okay, others calling you, right? And remember, you don't control the code of others. And not only that, but also you don't control how others are calling you, what data they are sending to you, right? So in this case, a couple of things to mention. Remember, please, to put access controls. We have a special session dedicated to access controls. Remember that attackers might execute operations on your systems in ways in which you wouldn't expect at the beginning. So be careful with that kind of things. Remember, anybody today can be a whale. Flash loans and flash mints are already here to stay. So be mindful of that kind of interactions and be ready to react to that. I should also say this, like front-end protections are, I would say, useless. It's just the same in the traditional world with front-end protections and back-end protections. This is the same. And we have seen a couple of, I think, vulnerability recently in which some validations were put in the front-end but not in the smart contract. So remember, anybody can call your smart contracts directly, bypassing your front-end. So be aware of that and put the necessary precautions in place. And one thing that people might be trying to do is not verifying their source code. I know that's security through obscurity. And recently we saw actually an exploit on a Flashbot searcher that didn't have verified source code, but it was hacked even. So remember, hackers are getting smarter, and they are kind of reverse engineering EVM code, and they will find vulnerabilities if they want to. So not verifying source code, I wouldn't say it's a reliable practice to protect your system. Another point when it comes to integrations is, and we talked about this a little bit. I'm not a specialist in economic risk and that kind of issues. But we have seen recently, again, like attacks on price manipulations and how the behavior and subtleties of new price oracles can affect systems, and how if you integrate with tokens that might change in price too quickly or too slowly can introduce threats into your system. So be mindful of that. And remember, projects out there are starting to, for instance, hire people, specialists in finances and economic risks to assess this kind of behaviors and assess the economic risks of their systems. I'm not saying that you should be doing that from day one, because probably it's quite expensive, but be mindful that that kind of things can be done. And as you mature, it might be a cool practice to integrate. And last but not least, cross-domain integrations, right? Honestly, I'm super worried about this, and we have seen a couple of examples, but I would say those are just the tip of the iceberg of what's to come in cross-domain integration, in like other people, like other accounts from other domains or chains or layer 2s calling your contracts through reaches. That's going to be a nightmare, and I'm not even sure how people are testing for that. Like, how do you do an integration test of interaction between chains? I'm not sure if that's possible, like reliably today. So remember what calls you. How are you defining a domain? Basically, when I say domain is that an account in a domain could be like an account in Ethereum, and an account in another domain could be an account in Optimism or an account in a sidechain, right? So when I say cross-domain integration is integrations or calls on interactions between different sidechains or different layers or different accounts in multiple. Yeah, I call them domains. Hopefully that's clarifying. Bottom line, don't assume that everything that's calling you is being originated in your chain, right? Today, your smart contract in Ethereum can receive a call from a bridge, and that call might be coming from another place. That might or might not be a very important threat, but I would say that in the future, it will become interesting to see what kind of interactions will appear. And recently, we have seen some bugs around it. So that's going to be interesting. Okay, so you have done everything of this that I told you, and you have documented, you have tested, you have paid attention to integrations and so on, and now it's time to launch your system, right? But I would say some people just rush the deployment, and I understand, right? So there are pressures from the team, from investors, from other stakeholders. At some point, yes, you have to ship the whole thing, and you have to land on mainnet, and I get that. But I would say there are ways and ways of launching to mainnet. So these are some considerations that you might take, and I have a couple of them, right? Thinking of permission systems might be easier. In that if you're coming from the more traditional web application world, for example, and not blockchain related, it's pretty well known, right? That you have admins and you have different roles and access controls in place and logins and so on. When it comes to smart contracts, things get a little bit messier, and there are no like silver bullets for these cases. So perhaps just thinking of more permission systems and not going like for full decentralization and everybody can do everything at the beginning. Perhaps it's just a good way to get started. I'm not saying it's the best, but perhaps, and there are trade-offs, but perhaps it's just it's a kind of an easier way to build a mental model of the system, right? But from what I have been told, including too many roles in a system can be cumbersome, because it then creates a kind of overhead when it comes to managing all of those roles. So there is a trade-off in there, and we have actually covered that in the session for secure access control, so probably you can refer to that. Mechanics for pausing, freezing, emergency shutdowns could be also nice practices. Some people will tell you that, well, your system has become more centralized and that's not good. But given the state of the art, I would say that being able to pause something instead of losing $1 million, I would rather pause it. But well, there are always some ways. There are trade-offs, and I would agree with that. But well, you should be considering these kind of things. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's something to think about. Upgradability mechanisms as well. We have covered that. There are trade-offs. Can be risky if you don't do it right. But being able to upgrade a contract, it's been proven once again and again and again useful for projects to save their systems. Another practice that people are implementing these days is putting caps in the amount of funds that your system can handle, at least at the beginning. So that means that you contain the risk, you limit the impact, and you don't lose $10 million, you only lose $1 million if you get hacked. Of course, not everybody will be able to deposit all of their money, but well, at least for the first iteration, something to consider. Integrations, I'm not repeating myself, we have covered that. And monitoring critical operations, we have a special section today about monitoring, so I will leave that for later. Some more practices when it comes to launching with safeguards. Incident response plans, be ready to get hacked and be ready to respond to a play out. You should have like a 5 steps, I don't know, a playbook or something that allows you to react, something that tells you, okay, if I see this dropping funds in my system, I will do this, this, and that. Shouldn't be like super comprehensive, but at least have something. Know that you might be hacked and try to have a safety net in there. Security contacts, you please start including security contacts in your doc strings, in your external documentation, in your readmes. It should be super easy and super straightforward to know how to contact you if I find the bug in your smart contract. It should be straightforward. I shouldn't doubt it, because if I doubt it, then there are problems with that. So it should be really straightforward to contact you. Please include security contact, like security@myproject.com, okay? Then lots of things around bug bounties and contests that you can do on top of the usual auditing. Platforms like Immunify or platforms like Code Arena are becoming more popular these days, and they can help you set up complementary practices when it comes to security, and they all help and contribute to that. Thinking of features like core and experimental also is something that projects are starting to do. Like, you have this set of features that are core to your system and you already know that they work well, but surrounding that, you have a set of features that you know that are experimental and are marked as experimental for your users. So that means that as time goes on and as those experimental features seem to be working nicely and they stand the test of time, perhaps then those can become core features of your system and so on, right? And so you evolve the system from experimental to more robust. So thinking those ways about features could be interesting as well. And again, projects are already doing these kind of things. And one interesting one that I've mentioned that I will highlight is beware of public exposure. Sometimes it's easy to overmarket things and telling people that please deposit lots and lots of money in my project because it's super cool and it's launching tomorrow. So you draw lots of attention, and you draw lots of attention from the bad guys and from the from the good guys and from the bad guys, right? So be careful with that. I'm not sure exactly what you can do about it, but I've been told that some people might prefer not making huge announcements in their first launch, so to make sure that they don't draw too much attention into our systems, which is something interesting to take into account. I mentioned audits, right? When I was telling code reviews and bug bounties. So let's stress a couple of things on the importance, like the powers and the limitations of audits. I think that little by little the community has been maturing in this sense. So we understand now that audits are not a bulletproof, but let's say a couple of things. Of course, not necessary. I mean, they are necessary. They are not sufficient. There are lots of complementary practices. People are going from one-off audits. That means I just audit my system one time, I deploy it, and I forget about it, and I never audit it again. They are moving away from that kind of thinking, and now people are thinking of, okay, let's try to do continuous engagement, right? Let's try to build security into our processes. Let's try to get in touch with security companies throughout the entire year. Let's try to have continuous engagements with them so that, for instance, every pull request that goes into my system and goes to mainnet is audited by a set of smart people. And that's already happening. That's already kind of engagements that we are having with different clients. And probably lots of security firms out there are doing similar things. Remember, audits are not bulletproof. Things that can fail will fail. So you can aim for defense in depth. And that essentially means getting insurance. That essentially means monitoring, having incident response, recovery plans, bug bounties, contests. I mean, there are lots of things that you can do that are complementary to audits. None of them are enough on their own, but together they will for sure enhance the security of the system. So thinking along these lines will be super helpful. What else should I be saying here? Okay, but quantity is okay, I said it. Okay, formal verification, it's another thing that is, I would say, growing in popularity. So get in touch with people that do formal verification and trying to think where that would apply to your system could be useful, perhaps. Monitoring, right? So we cover documentation, testing, integrations. We cover the safeguard for launching. We cover the importance of audits. And now let's say that you have deployed your system to mainnet. And what do you do now? Okay, you should be at least monitoring something. And this is growing in popularity. I'm not sure that everybody is monitoring, so I wanted to stress it here. This is the main question. You have something in mainnet, and I ask you, are you being hacked right now? Right now, like this very moment, is your contract with $1 million on mainnet being hacked right now? You should be able to answer that to me instantly. Because if you cannot answer instantly, that means that probably you don't have the tools to know very quickly where your system is okay or not. So what should be monitoring? What you should be monitoring at least, drops in system funds, spikes in account activity or in function calls in your system. That means having a baseline, understanding where you have spikes in the function calls or activity from multiple accounts, from a single account, from an account that has been funded recently or not. You should be monitoring your own privileged admin actions, right? You should be monitoring significant price changes of assets that you are integrating in your system if you're on the DeFi landscape. If there are large value transactions or transactions that have high gas, probably those are suspicious transactions. Usually the most complex hacks are hacks that take lots of block space. So that might mean that somebody's trying to hit your system or that has hit your system. So monitoring for that can be a good starting place. And even there are people perhaps monitoring sandwich attacks on their users and trying to understand what's going on with that, how much money they're losing, and whether they can do something about it or not, right? These are just a few. Probably, depending on each particular system, you can come up with lots of more insightful and customized versions of these practices or even new practices. But how? How do you implement monitoring, right? So, monitoring, lots of people working on this, very smart people. Open Zeppelin Defender would be my first choice, of course. Forta agents. Forta is a protocol that is a spin-off that has been incubated at Open Zeppelin and now has been launched. Also super interesting to take a look at. We will be covering it shortly. But Tenderly, Block Native, and the Graph also, there are ways in which you can use those tools to implement monitoring, and probably they can be complementary as well, right? Block Native, I think, in particular has monitoring the mempool feature, so that could be cool. So Open Zeppelin Defender, Forta agents, those would be, of course, my preferred choices. I mean, not only because I work at Open Zeppelin, but honestly, I have used them and I think they are valuable. And I've seen people use them and getting value from that. So particularly for Forta agents, you can go to explorer.forta.network, for example, and you will see this, right? You will see this UI. And this UI is actually showing you the output of real-time agents scanning transactions live on mainnet and detecting suspicious behaviors on that. So it's threat detection real-time on mainnet that you can see here using Forta. Anybody can code Forta agents. You can propose them. The entire protocol is super interesting. Thanks for sharing the link in there. So I would recommend you go there. There are some really cool integrations between Forta and Defender that you can use. I will talk about Defender shortly. So I would definitely give it a try. Definitely would try to see where I can contribute something, or where some agents that are already in place in Forta can be helpful to monitor something on my system. Because again, these are agents built by the community for the community to detect suspicious activity of mainnet, which is another change, right? So it's awesome. And I mentioned Defender. And when it comes to Defender, I'm talking about secure operations. That means that, okay, I've launched my system, I'm monitoring my system, but how on earth do I operate it, right? You want to pause it. How do you pause it? You want to operate it. How do you operate it? You have multisig. How do you use your multisig? And so on, right? So there are lots of things that perhaps you are right now doing with scripts with your mnemonics on plain text on a file called mnemonic.txt on your desktop. Perhaps that's not the most secure way of doing that. So there are platforms such as Defender that will allow you to handle and manage and operate your smart contracts in a far more reliable way. So what can you do? Well, you have a feature called admin that will allow you to do administrative actions on your smart contract with a beautiful UI. Or you have Sentinels, which is a really cool feature to do monitoring, and you can integrate Sentinels with Forta. And I've seen a demo of that, and it's super cool. You have auto tasks. Again, these are kind of automated actions with custom scripts that you can build to, for instance, I don't know, query a price oracle and trigger an action in your systems recurrently. So you can explore that kind of things as well, right? And there's another one called Relay, right? So you can have your keys are your own, are stored in a private relay, which is your own, and that relay will take care of the administrative actions for you, with lots of features for replaying transactions and gas management and all those kind of things that probably you don't want to implement yourself. So Defender, super great. I should really tell you, stay tuned for something that is coming up, I would say tomorrow, about Defender, that you will love it. I'm super excited about what's coming, so stay tuned. Probably will be announced in the Open Zeppelin Twitter account tomorrow, so stay tuned on what's coming for Defender, because I think it will be awesome. So some closing thoughts from auditors, and I want to shed some light into this. We are just wrapping up. Throughout the entire series, I've been sharing lots of things with you, right? Insights and considerations and risk and so on, like things that I've been learning in my career as an auditor and from talking with other auditors and talking with developers out there. And we cover from the very specifics to the very high level, and so it probably was the more like high level talk that we did. But I think that we took advantage of that to talk about things that perhaps on a single session wouldn't make sense, right? But seeing it all now, I think hopefully makes more sense. But I wanted to close, because you have listened to me a lot, right? But I wanted to tell you that I'm not the only one thinking of these kind of things. Like, we are paranoid about security, but we really want the entire ecosystem to grow and mature. And I think security is fundamental for that, right? So I wanted to bring some thoughts from auditors also. I told you that I've been bringing ideas and insights from developers, but what about auditors? So what I did is I got together with some auditors at Open Zeppelin, and I asked them a simple but not so simple question, which would be, okay, what would you recommend if you were kind of an advisor to a DeFi project or like a project that is about to launch to mainnet? If you were like a security advisor, what would you recommend to them? And this is what I'm about to show you, nothing that I wrote, okay? This is just thoughts from auditors at Open Zeppelin that they are sharing with you. And I'm just the messenger here. So these are some of them. I have lots of them, but these are some of them, okay? You can read it yourselves, take a screenshot, whatever. But I will just mention a couple of ones that I like. One is coding slowly. I like the idea of like slowly coding and thinking. That's a good one. again, audits are not enough is another one. Launching slowly, but first deploying on testnets, that's another one. There's one that is interesting that says, get someone to break your contract as early as possible, like using bug bounties, right? There's another thought around designing first and coding later, which we mentioned at the beginning. Using Open Zeppelin contracts, the importance of documentation, using Defender, setting up monitoring systems. These are thoughts from very different people, professionals, all like top auditors at Open Zeppelin, that are coming from different backgrounds, but are super interested in smart contract security. And these are their thoughts shared with you here, right? So that you see that we are all thinking on the same lines. And these are all practices that you should be paying attention to. And final one, probably security is worth investing in, right? So making sure that your systems continue to be secure and at least thinking about these kind of things. Probably if you're already here, probably you are already becoming a little bit more paranoid, which could be nice. So we are closing. We have done it. We have done the 6 sessions of the Secure Development Series. It's awesome. We have lots of people already here in the call, and lots of people have joined throughout the entire series. We went from the, again, very specifics to high level, and we went back and forth in that. So I really appreciate all of you being here, all of you having followed the entire series, all of you sharing feedback and love and thoughtful words about it. I think it's been great. For me, it has been like a great experience as well. Huichi, who you didn't see today, but also has been like super helpful in putting the entire series together. She's our events manager at Open Zeppelin, and she's been doing an amazing job at making sure that you got the invites, that we are here today meeting and everything. So Huichi has been awesome and super supportive as well in this. If you want to read a little bit more about this, remember, go to the YouTube channel at Open Zeppelin. The entire series is on a single playlist that you can watch, that you can share, that you can like watch later, whatever, watch on the weekends, that you can learn from. You can share it with your peers, with people that you enjoy learning with. Yes, those series are recorded. Everything is on YouTube. Everything is open. And this one will be on YouTube as well, recorded, right? So you go to the Open Zeppelin channel, everything is in there. And if you like reading, go to the blog.openzeppelin.com/smart contract security guidelines. Every single session that we did has a corresponding written article that you will find in there. In the upcoming days, we will be uploading the final 2 ones. So everything is in there. Everything is for you to read, to watch, to learn, to share, and to continue helping us building like a more secure ecosystem. Having said that, I should also say that we are hiring. We have many open roles, and today with us we have David Bessin, our awesome technical recruiter. He's in there, and I will just pass the mic on to him so he has a few words.
Thank you very much, and it was great to sit in on this session. I actually was really happy to see a couple of people make comments that I've spoken to in the past. It was good to see you comment, Nicolas. Good to see you comment as well, Anish. But I just wanted to make a quick introduction and present myself as a resource for any of you who wanted to learn a little bit more about the company, Open Zeppelin. Obviously, as Tincho mentioned, we're hiring. So if it's less about the actual technical stuff, the smart contract stuff, what have you, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Let's connect if you are now or in the future interested in learning about what it might be like to join our team. Other than that, I just, that was pretty much it. Just wanted to say a quick hello and just let you guys know that I'm here as a resource for you for all of the questions that you might have about Open Zeppelin, what we do and how we do it.
Awesome. Thank you very much, David. Hopefully people start reaching out soon. Lots of open positions and super interesting, cool stuff that we are building. So David is yours. Reach out to him and he will be like super welcoming and will help you on your journey. Awesome. So thank you all for joining. Here's a QR code that you can scan to claim the POIP for the last session. It's there. You can scan it now and you will claim the POIP for this last session, session number 6. If you want to contact me, I'm on Twitter, Tincho Abate. You can shoot me an email, tincho@openzeppelin.com, and lots of resources already shared. in our blog, in our forum, if you can check out Defender. Remember, stay tuned for what's coming tomorrow for Defender. You will love it. And please scan that QR code. But having said that, one last thing. If you have attended all sessions of the series, there's a special rare pop-up for you. So what you have to do is, after scanning this one, which is the one for the last session, you should shoot an email to events@openzeppelin.com showing all the previous pop-ups that you have collected for the last previous 5 sessions, and showing this one as well. And you will get a pop-up, like a special one, just because you have attended the entire sessions, and you can show the rest of the people that you have attended all sessions and that you have endured and that you have listened to me talking for many hours. So I'd say that's it, people. Thank you very much. This has been fun to me. Again, I'm super thankful for everyone and for the words. Hopefully in the future soon we will have another series. We'll doing something new, something super interesting as well. So stay tuned for what's coming from education at Open Zeppelin. We'll do some more cool things together. So let me see if I can do this. Now it's a little bit bigger. Probably you can try to scan it. Otherwise, I will just edit the slide live and try to share it as well. Meanwhile, I will go to Slido and I will try to see if there are any questions in there or thoughts. Okay, there is one question from Anish. Thank you, Anish. How much do you use static and dynamic analysis for testing, or is it mostly manual analysis? Okay. Okay, I'm there again. Perfect. We can do this. Let me think. I mean, there's some part of static and dynamic analysis when we want to find vulnerabilities. I'm not a fan of the security tooling out there, just because I think that in my way of auditing and finding issues, I'm better on the manual side of things. So I'm better at kind of going very deep into the code line by line and finding issues in that way. Some tools that I have been using mostly is for kind of the exploratory phases at the beginning, where, for instance, static analyzers such as Slither would allow me to print diagrams or that kind of things, or inheritance change or function call graphs to understand how complex what I'm auditing is and how complicated or not would be to find issues in the right, just to get to familiarize with the code base. For more dynamic things, such as, I don't know, symbolic execution, fuzzing, and that kind of things, I've been trying those, and at Open Zeppelin we did some experiments with those. We have mixed feelings about it. I think that the state of the tools is getting better, particularly fuzzers. I think that would be super useful, and we should be getting more familiar with that and probably starting to use it more. I think that there's value in there, as well as there is value in manual reviews, right? So they are complementary. I wouldn't say do one nor the other. I think that everything helps to make a system more secure. But personally, I tend to go more to the manual analysis. Okay, there is one question from Evelyn. I recently contributed my first PR and would like to do more for OC. When is OC launching a DAO and social token to incentivize participation? I'm not familiar with that, so I don't have much comments on that. If you want to do more for Open Zeppelin, if you feel like you want to continue contributing to our work, probably a great way to do that is getting in touch with David, trying to understand how your profile fits in one of the open positions that we have, or you can contribute in some other ways. So you can start working with us at Open Zeppelin and trying to contribute with us to the ecosystem. I'm not familiar with any DAO or social token, so I don't have nothing to say about it. Anonymous question says, is there any code review checklist available? Probably there is, and you should probably refer to all the material that the Securium bootcamp is putting out there. Securium. You can just Google it. I think that they are publishing lots of good material, and that they have some review checklist that you can check out. Honestly, I would be mindful with that, in that checklist might be helpful. They are definitely not enough. Okay, so my analysis and trying to think out of the box tend to be quite super powerful tools to find security vulnerabilities and actual issues. Like the most critical ones, I wouldn't say they would fall under a checklist. Okay, so they are useful, most perhaps even for the most beginners, to understand what kind of things you should be looking for. But as you mature, as you grow as a security code reviewer, probably trying to think outside the box and not following checklists could also be interesting. Okay, Anish, another one. Any thoughts on multi-call patterns that use delegate call? Are they generally bad practice? Let me think. I would say depending on the implementation, usually. I've seen good implementations of that, and I think that actually, for instance, the multi-call pattern that we have at Open Zeppelin contracts has a delegate call, but can only delegate call to the same contract, so that should be kind of restricted. But multi-calling in multiple delegate calls to arbitrary addresses, that would be very problematic. So I would stay away from it. I mean, the devil is in the details, right? So I wouldn't feel comfortable saying it's secure or insecure. Just I would pay closer attention to that. Anonymous, any tips on writing articles to get feedback? I'm not sure if I follow the question, so if you can submit it again, trying to clarify and give a little bit more details about it, that would be cool. Thanks. Another one from Anonymous. Hello, do you know which auditors are hiring? What are your recommendations for learning smart contract auditing? Yeah, that's a cool one. We have an open position called the Blockchain Security Engineer at Open Zeppelin. You can go there, you can see the requirements and kind of the nice to haves and what does it mean to be a blockchain security engineer at Open Zeppelin. Reaching out to David as well about it. He will give you more context on how that looks like. Specifically on learning smart contract auditing, I think I do have some recommendations, and actually today I was sharing exactly that in the Discord of the Securium Bootcamp. I'm in there as a mentor, and there is a channel, and you can ping me after. I know you're anonymous. If you want to remain anonymous, I'm not sure, but if you want to pick me afterwards, I Twitter, email, whatever, I can send you a link to that Discord server, or you can probably find it. And I left like lots of comments on how to get started in smart contract auditing, right? Just to summarize, I would read security audit reports. I would read analysis of vulnerabilities and postmortems. I would play capture the flag war games such as the vulnerable DeFi, Ethernaut, Capture the Ether, the CTF that Paradigm has, even though that's a little bit more complicated. So that should give you kind of the ideas of the attacks and the vulnerabilities and the different types of exploits that you can run on smart contracts, right? From multiple angles. And throughout the process, you should be like learning lots about the Ethereum ecosystem, the EVM, Solidity, DeFi, market conditions, and many other concepts. So going in that way, I'm not saying you will do it in a weekend, but slowly you will start gaining the knowledge and becoming or starting the path to become a security auditor. I should say, like, you should be having some you should be familiar with programming languages and that kind of things, right? Because you will be probably reviewing smart contracts. So, okay. Any other Okay, probably we don't have more questions. So, okay, perfect. So Huichi has shared the link to the Discord server. There's a channel in there. I'm a mentor in there, so you can ping me in there and you can see actual my answers in there. So that's it. Thank you very much all for joining. Great seeing you all again. Very familiar names in the chat. Again, remember the entire series is on YouTube. You can watch it. We have written articles about it on our blog. If you want to claim the special POAP, shoot an email to event@openzeppelin.com and see you all around. Thank you very much.